Welcome back into another episode of George in the Jungle, presented as always by Remington Tavern. Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale, Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at RemyTav Cincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. And with that, George, we are looking at a Cincinnati Bearcats football team coming off of a 3-9 season, staring at a very meaningful game here in going into week 9, I believe, against the Colorado Buffaloes, and maybe week 10. I'm trying to think. We have what? 7 games in. Yeah, it's week 9. It's week 9. But very meaningful game. But before we get to any type of preview on Coach Prime and those Colorado Buffaloes, we have to talk about what they did on Saturday, as they win a homecoming game. It wasn't pretty, but it was timey. It was gritty. They got the job done, 24-14 over the Arizona State Sun Devils. George, what were your initial thoughts? I'm assuming you were at the game, as you generally are.
I was at the game. Yeah, I was surprised that it looked like UC was the team playing, on West Coast time at 9 in the morning early in that game. It was crazy. It's like I thought Arizona State might be sleepwalking through the first few minutes of that game, but definitely UC was. But, once they got that fumble out of there and had a 4th down stop early in the game, and, the defense did some things to help turn that momentum after giving up that early touchdown. And then UC played really well for the rest of the first half. I thought they played very well. Missed a field goal, but late in the half again, as usual, it seems like there's always that letdown going into that halftime locker room. But
3 games in a row
with that first half.
3 games in a row that's happened, and 4 times this season that's happened.
Well, and you know what everyone's sitting there thinking, because it did. It kind of felt like wasn't quite as bad as that Pitt game with the air going out, but it felt like it. And everyone's talking about that in the stands. And nobody felt great about that game at halftime. I shouldn't say it didn't feel great, but they certainly felt like it wasn't over by any stretch, that Arizona State still had a chance to come back. And then they come out in the second half and they do get a third quarter score, and things tightened up. But God bless UC in that offense and Corey Kiner, and they go on that long drive, and I forget how long that drive was. It was over 8 minutes. That ended the third quarter and went into the fourth. And even though they didn't come away with any points, and they should have, but they did turn the ball over deep on downs when it was like 4th and goal at the 3, something like that. But it took 8 minutes off the clock, and then Arizona State's in the position of having to drive the length of the field, get a touchdown or a field goal, then have to get the ball back and get another score. So it put them in a bad spot, that drive. I wish UC would have finished it off and put any doubt as to who was going to win that game. And I get Satterfield going for the touchdown there as opposed to the field goal, because if I remember right, he would have gone up 13, or you go up 17 and it's over. And I totally get him doing that, and going for that 4th down. But there were a lot of good things in that game, and a lot of it was defensively, where you see Antoine Peak continue to emerge as not just a player, a great player on this defense. I mean, he's making plays. If he's not punching the ball out, he's making a big stop or a big hit. And I'm really proud of him, because, a walk-on, and I remember seeing him last year in practice at Higher Ground, and he stood out to me as someone that flew around pretty good and might have some promise. And it's good to see him fulfilling that because he's taken full advantage of every opportunity he's gotten. I thought the linebackers looked pretty good. I thought the whole defense looked pretty darn good from start to finish. And when you hold a team to 14 in college football or whatever it was, I'll take that. I'll take that every game.
Yeah. Speaking of things that you'll take, holding Cam Scatabo to 75 yards on 17 carries. I will certainly take that. They were able to stymie the. He's a beast. He is a beast, and they kept him under 100 yards. Another running back that they've been a top 10 in the country, not the conference, that they've held under 100 yards. So the defense, I keep saying this, but since the bye week has really, really turned it on.
Yeah, it seems like they're hitting their stride and they're able to play without thinking. They're able to react and be where they're supposed to be without having to stop and think about it. And all those things are to be expected when you got a new defensive coordinator and you're running new stuff and you got a bunch of new players, which, all of the above on this season for UC football. And it's great to see it come together and come together in this way to where the defense is, we know what a liability it was last year, and it's starting to look like it's a positive and a big positive for UC. Sorsby, I still like what he's doing. I like what the running game's doing. It wasn't perfect. You're right. The second half, you got to find a way to score. But they did do enough to win. So I just very pleased with that homecoming win and where UC is right now. 5-2, I think we both would have sat here and probably taken that at the beginning of the year.
Some crazy stats that we've talked about over the course of the last several shows between the nightcap and the BC or the Bearcat bounce last night. 23 first downs for Cincinnati, 3 of 12 on third down. I think that's wild that you had 23 first downs and you were only 3 of 12 on third down.
Hard to do.
Yeah. And I guess the biggest stat is in the second half, you only had Cincinnati with 4 total possessions.
Yeah, that one was big where they took a lot of time off the clock because, if you're not going to score, you're going to want to use a lot of clock and leave them with the ball deep in their own territory, which is exactly – that one drive was just so huge because even though UC doesn't come away with points, Arizona State was in a bad spot where they had to move quickly and move a long distance to remain in that game. So I give the offense credit for doing that. You just wish they would have finished it off. But Kiner had a couple runs in that drive that were really, really, really good, where he's bouncing off tackles. And I don't know how he stayed up on that one. There were 3 different times I thought he was going down, and then he bounces off, and it's just his balance is something else. And then he had another run in there. I think it was in that drive too, where he was able to get the hand down and keep from going down to the turf. Just some of those things he does balance-wise and able to stay on his feet is pretty darn impressive. And it came in really handy in the second half of that ball game because it was when Arizona State scored, and it's what was it at that point, 24-14, I guess, because all the scoring for UC was in the first half. So it's 24-14 with plenty of time, and you're thinking, God dang, this feels like Pitt. Is it happening again? And the whole crowd was thinking that. It was hard not to. So it was nice to see them go on that march. Even if they didn't come away with points, it had a definite something to do with the outcome of this game. It definitely had an impact.
How impressed have you been with Evan Pryor and the opportunities that he's getting are very limited. He is taking full advantage, though. He's got, I believe, 4 touchdowns now in the season, 3 of them being just monster long runs that we have not seen since Jerome Ford was here. But he just seems to find a spot where not just you're scoring on these long plays, but they're at crucial moments.
Yeah. Yeah, and that run he had, the 55-yard touchdown run, great blocking on that. But again, he exploded through there. And, and then anyone who did have a chance, he pretty much outran them. And great blocking all the way down the field. One of the wide receivers had a pretty good block in there. And obviously, the offensive line did a hell of a job. But he takes full advantage. If you give him a crack, he makes the most of it. And it's a great combination for them to have with him and Kiner back there and having those kind of weapons. And the coaches get a lot of guff, but give them credit for using those guys as well as they do and picking their spots. And it doesn't always work out, but at least it kind of sends a message to the other team. We kind of got something here in our back pocket that you got to stay on your toes and be ready for. And man, that was just such a huge play. And then Sorsby running the ball in a couple times, and that was a beautiful thing, because that's what, when he came in and what we saw in Indiana, he's able to run the football and be a weapon in that part of the game too. And he certainly was Saturday in that Arizona State game, scoring those 2 touchdowns and looked good doing it. So, yeah, I just – you wish they would have tacked on. I mean, they've got – but not a perfect game, but it's a win. And hopefully they build that momentum. And then, UC fans got treated to seeing another team who has problems with kickers. I mean, it's not just Cincinnati.
And you saw that.
I mean, were those 2 of the worst kicks you've ever seen? And the coach kind of went too far, I guess, throwing the dude under the bus. But these were terrible kicks. I understand him being mad, but there's something going on there, and it may not just all be the kicker.
George, how much more angry is he with the fact that they had a serviceable kicker 2 years ago, and he knew that we have him on our roster, and he's not even kicking for the Bearcats.
Right. I know. That would chap you pretty good.
I can only imagine. Well, we saw what the result was. My goodness.
Oh, my word. Yeah, those were not even close. And you feel bad for the kid. I mean, I don't want him making everything against UC, but I felt bad for him. And then afterwards, when I heard the coach say what he said, I guess, did he walk that back? Did you ever see any more
on
about
Twitter?
it?
He did, I think 2 or 3 times that evening, and then again in his presser the next day. He made sure to walk it all back, or maybe it was a tweet.
That wasn't a wise move on his part. And
look, he's a young coach. He's been in some great spots, but he's still a young coach, still learning the ropes, and found out very, very quickly that you cannot single out a kicker the way that he did in college football in the year 2024.
No,
and live to tell the tale.
I do have to say, though, I appreciated the look of disgust and how mad he was about that.
Look,
I get it.
And we discussed it last night. I mean, Ryan Royer said that you have to do those kinds of things. With it, you can do those kinds of things, but you have to do those kinds of things behind closed doors. You do not air them publicly, and it can be handled in a way where you show the kid you're disdain. You just do it privately, not publicly, while also opening tryouts that you may or may not actually have. It's a bad look.
Yeah, correct. And I totally agree with that. And when he did it, and I'm seeing this, and I'm watching on my iPad, I'm just like, whoa, this is not going to be the last we hear of him saying this. There's got to be, I mean, to me, there had to be some players on the team pretty mad about it too. The coach did that. I mean, that can cause you some problems when you do that. So, but yeah, he's learning. You don't really necessarily want your head coach learning on the job, but sometimes it happens. And, sometimes it works out. We'll see if it does in this case. but obviously UC's had some head coaches kind of learning on the job, and the last time they did it worked out very well, I thought.
Well, that brings us to Colorado this week, as both teams sit in a spot where essentially somebody's going to get a knockout punch, by my estimation, out of contention for the Big 12 championship.
That's certainly what it looks like. And what a matchup coming up. What a game. And, Cincinnati fans have kind of circled this game, and I believe there's a lot of people going out there. It's Parents' Weekend, and people have paid gobs of money to get into this game and just to get out there and get a hotel and all. This is going to be – and it's a late game, 10:15 Eastern. It's going to be a juiced up crowd, and it's going to be wild. It's going to be crazy. And in my opinion, out there and in that environment, it's going to take a hell of an effort. It really is. They played Kansas State really tough. It definitely is a legit team. They're going to see some legit athletes. I'm very anxious to see how the defense controls that offense, and I'm very anxious to see how Sorsby and company handles that defense. And I hopefully UC will be able to establish some kind of running game to kind of help slow everything down a little bit.
So Colorado is number 1 in the conference in sacks. They are also number 1 in the conference in tackles for loss. I don't love either of those stats against this offense. You also have Travis Hunter, who is trending up as far as looking able to play, at least according to what Coach Prime said today. Coach Prime did go on to say, though, that he loves Cincinnati, what they're doing. He thinks that they just handle business. It's not pretty, but they just get the job done. I think it either handle business or get the job done. He used one of those cliches. Either way, it sounded like he has respect for the team. We've seen him say some things that were a little out of pocket at times throughout the season, but it sounds like he's got respect for what Coach Satterfield is doing here and what the Bearcats are bringing to the table. And again, you look at both teams last year, 7 wins total between the two of them. Not great. And both teams are clearly on the right path to righting the ship. But who would have thought, looking, ahead back in August, that you're circling this game as one of these two are going to emerge as still in contention and the other is probably knocked out.
Yeah, boy, if UC comes out of there with a win, that's going to send the message. Coming out there with a win, game like this, be 6-2, 4-1 in the what? Yeah, is it 4-1? They would be in the Big 12.
They would be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's strong. But I don't want to count it ahead of time because it's going to be so darn tough. But it's also interesting that these two coaches, if you go back to before Satterfield was hired and everyone's thumping that tub for Prime, and then he ends up taking that Colorado job when there was some thought that Prime could end up here, just given his past history with Cincinnati and he's really always said that he enjoyed his time here and with the Reds and enjoyed the city and all of that. So it kind of made sense that he might be in the mix for that if Cincinnati was interested, but he goes out there and, Satterfield ends up here, and now here they are in a big game in just their second season as head coach at their respective schools. So there's a lot going on with this game. And, all that stuff flies out the window when they're on the field, but I'm just really, really anxious to see this game. I don't know. Darren has a question here about UC seeing the kind of speed at wide receiver position this year, and I don't know that they have, because Colorado can throw it out there on you, and that's going to be a big, big story in this game. It is will UC be able to handle all that? And I think Coach Veit's in there scheming up some stuff, and they're gonna they're gonna give everyone as much help as they can, and I'm anxious to see how they handle it. It's fun, that down year last year was not a whole lot of fun going through it. This one, I'm really enjoying this season as we go through it. Hated it after that Pitt game, but quite honestly, since then, I've been impressed with what I've seen.
Are you nervous at all with the fact that this past week the Bearcats were not able to really get those big chunk plays outside of the Evan Pryor? Outside of the Evan Pryor run, you did have a Corey Kiner run of 20 yards as well, but you didn't have a receiver have more than the longest catch by a receiver was Tony Johnson at 17 yards. No one else had a longer catch. You've seen completion percentages going up for Sorsby as he's dinking and dunking and kind of being a game manager type as opposed to the airing it out there as we saw earlier in the season. It's more that just feels like he's settling into taking what the defense gives him as opposed to kind of just airing it out. They made some effort to do it.
Yeah, they did. One was picked, which turned out to be basically a punt.
Right.
Down. But that was a bomb. There was another bomb going the other way, I think, in the second half that they missed on. So they've taken some shots. And on that second one, he saw, straight man coverage, just one-on-one coverage. And he's just like, I'm taking the shot. And I don't fault him for that. You got to do that. But yeah, they haven't been able to connect on him. And if they weren't scoring at all, I'd be really, worried about that. I'm not quite as worried as maybe I should be because they're still fairly efficient, as you mentioned, completion percentage and those kind of things. But
74%
these drives, and you gotta hit these kicks, and you gotta get points when you're down there, and when they stop doing that, and a couple times Saturday they didn't. That's when it's going to burn you when you can't take those long shots and make a quick strike. Because some teams will do that to you. They'll just kind of put you in a box and just make you dink and dunk all the way. And the theory is there sooner or later you're going to make a mistake. You're going to jump. You're going to jump before the snap and get a penalty, and then you're behind the sticks and you're off schedule, or you're going to fricking throw a bad pass. It gets picked or it gets tipped, or there's going to be a sack or something. You're going to make a mistake that sets you behind. And maybe that's what teams are trying to do to UC now. I don't know, but I do know that I'm not in Panicsville yet about that. I'm not at all. In fact, I strike me dead because a lot of people probably will, but I think Scott Satterfield knows what the hell he's doing on offense. And I know people will complain about play calls here and there, but they do that about every head coach. But I think he can scheme up some stuff pretty good. And my friend I sit next to at the games would tell me I'm crazy.
Well, it's certainly looking that way when he has his guys here as an entire season to try and bring in his guys as opposed to just a couple weeks to do so. And we're seeing some of the results of that. Colorado did open up as -4 though, and that line has moved to -5.5. And the over-under on this game is 57.5. Looks like they're expecting a shootout.
Yeah, and I would expect one too. You don't always get them when you're expecting them. We certainly expected one at Texas Tech and got it. Expected one at Central Florida and didn't get it at all. So you never know how these suckers play out. But I'm totally looking at everything and, seeing Colorado a couple times this year, seeing UC every game this year, I would expect some points in this game. No doubt about it.
All right. Well, I'm going to pull an audible on you here as we have quite a few people here in the room watching, and we're going to talk UC hoops as you were there to actually take in the game in attendance as UC played an exhibition game against Ohio State. and won 80-62. Your thoughts as you're walking out of the gym after having watched that game?
I think I said, wow, this is going to be a fun year. And then I hear somebody next to me go, wow, this is going to be a fun year. Then I'm walking in the restroom and someone's like, this is going to be a lot of fun this year, right? Everybody was pumped. It was a lot of fun. It was it was probably more than I could have asked for, what I was going to see out of this team, because you see, even though it was an exhibition and Wes's substitution, and he said going in it was going to be a little different than what he would do, which you would expect. But you got a glimpse of what he wants to see his team do and the way he wants them to run and push things. And he let that first bunch go for a while. I think he was going to pull them out at the 15-minute mark, and there were no whistles. And they went for like 2 more minutes. And then poor Aziz was ready to die. Like he was doubled over at points during that stretch. But overall, I think that it was a very positive night, very impressive. I can go down a list of players, and I mean, my God, both point guards looked really good. Day looked really, really good for a while there. Then he got really sloppy at the end of his play in the second half, but they all did. And they ended up with 21 turnovers, which I knew there were a lot of turnovers, but that was kind of shielded by the way they out-rebounded Ohio State. I mean, they owned the boards every which way and where. And so Day and Jizzle, they are better than they were last year, just based on that glimpse.
It should be expected.
Better, right. Better. Day was dynamic at times. Jizzle looks like he's getting it defensively now as well. The whole thing looked good. And then, Skillings was Skillings. He looked good. Mitchell was unbelievable. I'm probably higher on Page than some people are, and I think he's going to push for some playing time. He is a big dude, and he moves very, very well. And he's pretty darn good with the ball. And he had that one move with the little baby hook in the lane, and that was a nice move. He took a nice dribble and, a nice turn, laid it in. It was impressive. And
that's an improvement on what we saw from the backup center last year, where when he would make his move, it felt like 50% or better was a turnover.
Yes, it was. Yes,
he would end up traveling because he moved too fast and didn't dribble. So I'm good with that. If he's got a little baby, we haven't seen a nice little baby hook since Kyle Washington.
Yeah, I thought Page looked pretty darn good in my book. In fact, watching him out there and watching him get up and down the floor, I'm like, he's going to push for some playing time before this thing's over. In my opinion, I think he's pretty darn good. We went through Mitchell. Skillings looked good. I thought Ravon, when he got in, I was glad he got in the first half and got a good amount of time there. I felt like he should have gotten more time than, I don't know what he ended up playing in the second half, but I wish he would have gotten in a little more with early in that second half and play, because I thought he played very well in his shift in the first half. I thought he looked really good, looked like he was on top of things, and he made some nice plays, both ends of the floor. So I was pumped about that. What else? Josh Reed made his shots. I would say Hickman probably didn't have his best game, right? Probably did not, he still is athletic, moves well. I thought everybody displayed pretty quick hands. I was surprised by that. I mean, they were pestering defensively. They were getting in the way of a lot of stuff, getting their hands on a lot of balls and passes, and just Ohio State couldn't have been a happy bunch at halftime after what hit them in that first half, because UC was pretty suffocating. You go down the list of those players. Hickman would be the one I would say probably didn't have as good of outing as maybe what I was hoping, but that's going to happen. And I think what's going to happen with Wes, and CJ didn't have to play a whole lot, as Wes told him at halftime, dude, I know what you can do. I'm just going to not play you in the second half, and I get that. But Wes is going to have to do a lot of figuring out on the fly, like who his hot hands are that night and rolling with them a little bit, because they're deep. They're 10 deep or more of guys you can trust, which is crazy to me, especially in this day and age of the portal and all that. And for him to hang on to 4 of those 5 starters and bring in, 4 more guys or whatever it is that are contributors is pretty darn good.
What a terrible problem to have, George.
Tyler Betsy looked good.
Yeah, I was going to get there. You hadn't quite gotten to Tyler Betsy yet, but terrible problem to have.
Yeah, I know. That's why I left that arena walking on air. It looked good.
I know it's an exhibition, but what does I mean? Obviously, you know that this is going to be fun, but how much weight do you really put into an exhibition game, George?
I usually don't put a whole lot unless I see something I want to see. How's that for an answer? That's bad. I'd be a terrible coach. I would be, guys, you got it. Just keep doing what you're doing. I would be a horrible coach.
From all indications, though, it seemed that Coach West was also kind of upset that they played as well as they did, because it's going to be hard to be like going into practice like, you guys didn't do this well, but I want you to do it better.
Right. Well, he probably had a cut up of every turnover in that game.
I don't know.
There were some bad ones. There were some bad ones, but you know how that is too.
Right.
That game got out of hand for a while. And it was like, oh my God, are they going to win by 30? And so when you got a lead like that, sometimes you probably try to do some things you shouldn't try to do. But a lot of those turnovers came early too. I think they had, I don't know how many they had at halftime, but it was a lot. I saw it on the board. God, was it as many as 14? It couldn't have been that many. They played
11
in the first half.
11
in the first half. That's still too many. And I think the point guards had like 7 of those in the game, and they got to fix that. That you can't be just giving the ball away, giving possessions away. But it's the first time out of the box, and you're probably going to be apt to have more turnovers at this point in the season and in an exhibition game than you're going to have. You hope when you're playing, Kansas or Baylor or someone like that, Houston, during the Big 12 season by then. And that's what all this non-conference stuff's for too. They got to get ready for what's going to be a heck of a good conference, and so strong at the top. When you see, 3 of the top 5 in the poll, 4 of the top 8, 5 of the top 10 are Big 12 teams, that's absurd. That's a strong top 5 in the conference that are in the top 10 of the AP poll.
Yeah, it's
I think about that. If you finish 6th in that conference, you're a top 20 team and probably a fairly decent seed in the tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. There's certainly not a lack of quad 1 games on this schedule for the Cincinnati Bearcats, especially once you get to that conference play. So we'll see they'll have plenty of schedule strength when they get through with that. It's just get the wins, and it's going to be fun. And it's I don't know. I don't want to say this team's as deep as since whatever, but man, it's a deep team. You just hope that you see some improvement in the home games this year. You hope you see some improvement in some of those close games this year, so you don't.
Yeah, that's a big one.
End up on the wrong side of some of those, 1, 2, 3 possession games.
How many of those that we see? I mean, you can just rattle them off. Texas, Baylor. Sitting here thinking back at those games that got away. I think Oklahoma was one too, if I remember right. There was a close game down to the wire, and they didn't get it. So yes, they got to turn some of those around. But my word, I think they got the manpower to do it. That was an impressive display Friday night.
Well, should be a fun season, George.
It's what everybody said leaving the arena. I was laughing. I just said that, and then this guy walking out on the other side of me tells his buddy that. And like I said, I hear it. It's just, yeah, that was a very happy crowd on Friday night, and it was a love fest. That's what it was.
Well, there was another happy crowd for an entirely different reason up on the Mistake by the Lake as the Cleveland Browns lose their starting quarterback for the year, and the crowd cheered.
Yeah.
Crazy. And what was another ugly game, though, for the Cincinnati Bengals. They come out victorious, 21-14. People say they're turning their season around. You hate that it takes them until, the fourth game of the season to start getting hot. But here we are again. Cincinnati, though, at 3-4, with a favorable. We talked about this last week, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago, but a favorable portion of the schedule. But they now sit at 3-4 and look like, I don't want to say that they're humming because I don't believe that to be the case, but the defense has looked better again.
Yeah,
and it seems that there were some injuries. Orlando Brown. We'll see what he's able to do coming up here this week. You saw Geno Stone after he had a nice interception. I thought he broke his leg.
Everybody did.
It looked like he broke his leg.
On it.
And apparently it's just a shin injury. He says he's going to, if it's up to him, he says he's playing this week. He was up walking around, so it's not as if it's just lip service. It wasn't like they were interviewing him as he's seated in an air cast. He was up walking around, which does not indicate a broken leg. So you also have, again, just some kicking's not easy. They're now calling Evan McPherson maybe Mac instead of Money Mac.
I know. I was going to ask you that question. How you feel? I mean, I think he's 10 of 13 on the year though with field goals, right?
It's not crazy, but it's not what we were accustomed to either. Because you set the bar where you did, and now I compared it last night to golf. And I don't know if that's necessarily a fair comparison, but once it starts getting in your head, it continues to get in your head, and it's really hard to get out of your head. And I don't know that that's necessarily where McPherson is compared to, what's been going on in Cincinnati with the college team here in town. But it's a weird thing with just kicking not being easy. And this comes the same week that they talk about potentially making the uprights thinner in the NFL. If they continue to have such great success, we're going to make the uprights smaller. But Evan McPherson is the highest paid kicker in the league, I believe, currently. Or if not, he's top 5.
Maybe that's why these kickers are missing all of a sudden. They don't want those goalposts moved in. It's like, let's give them something to think about here.
Got to play the long game.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't know what's going on there. It is weird, and it's like, and when you think about Nathan Hawks, he always hits it good. He just doesn't get it. And it's like, and
straight as an arrow.
Maybe my buddy's right. He just kicks it straight, no matter where he is on the field. Mm-hmm. If it's the left hash mark, it goes straight down the left. If it's the right, and it did happen the other day. The right one went right down the right hash mark, and it's like, and that can be fixed. It's probably, I'm not a kicking expert, but my God, he hits it good. And McPherson usually hits it good unless he gets a bad hold or something, and that certainly wasn't the case this week. It was the previous week, but the Bengals offense was just kind of a mess when you look at 59 yards rushing. You talked about UC's third downs. The Bengals 2 of 13. How do you win a game when you're 2 of 13 on third downs? They did. They happened to hit the play to Higgins and the play to Chase, but
you win a game like that because you returned a kickoff in the very first play of the game for a touchdown. That's how
I'm glad you mentioned that. That was Charlie Jones.
I know. Look, if these Bengals continue to make me eat crow, I'm okay with that. I am
Right.
truly okay
I
with
agree.
that. But that's how you win. That's how you win a game when your offense is sputtering, though.
Man, oh man, yeah. But when you take the opening kick back and you don't score the rest of the first half, that was a 7-6 ball game at halftime. They had done absolutely nothing
Nothing.
but watch Joe Burrow get sacked 3 times in the first half. Then they cleaned that up, thankfully, because that was a half dominated by the defenses, and the Browns defense had the edge in that, in my opinion.
What Cleveland should be concerned with is the fact that Kevin Stefanski maybe shouldn't have a job right now. And maybe he had to listen to higher ups who told him he had to start the 200 and some odd $1 million guy.
Right.
But if Jameis Winston starts that game, George, the Cleveland Browns probably trounce the Cincinnati Bengals.
I'm not going to say trounce, but
trounce.
I do kind of know what's happened to Deshaun Watson. I mean, if you remember him a few years ago, I mean, let's face it, the Browns invested a lot of money in that guy. And unfortunately for those dummies, they did it after all this stuff started coming out. And it's like, what are you thinking? Because this could go south in a hurry. Because it did. Like, you could see that coming, and they still do it. And I just thought that was a bad move. I thought that guy was toxic. It's like, if you're going to trade for him and have to give him a big contract to approve, I didn't think anyone would do it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't even entertain that thought. And Cleveland did it. And now they've got him, and you're right. He probably shouldn't have started that game anyway.
And I can't wrap my mind around the fact that you had Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTG, as your backup and had Jameis as your emergency third string, because DTG didn't show me anything that looked like an NFL quarterback.
And the other thing, too, with that defense Cleveland has, and they've had some injuries off and on, but overall, they've got maybe the best defense going right now. They're pretty darn good. And so you don't have to score a ton offensively. And
rumors are they're shopping Myles Garrett.
And that'll be, I mean, who wouldn't want that guy? I would take that guy.
31 teams. 31 teams in the league want that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He's such a difference maker. And it's crazy that Cleveland would trade him, but I would guess that he's probably the impetus behind this and saying, you know what? I tried. You got to get me out of here.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't want to go down as Joe Thomas. I want to go out.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I'll tell you what, we talk about the issues of the Bengals, and thank God the Browns are not our problem, because they can't get out of their own way. They really can't. And they've had some good players. They've had that good defense for a few years now, and they still can't figure it out up there. And that's fine. They can have that problem, because there's enough issues for the Bengals in that division, with Pittsburgh doing what it's doing now and Russell Wilson looking the way he did Sunday night. I'll be anxious to see if that continues. And then, my God, Baltimore looked like world beaters. That team's kind of got it all going right now. I don't know if they can keep it up the entire season, but the division is going to be tough for the Bengals to, not just climb back in it, but be able to win it. I guess I can probably forget about that, just hope for the wild card. But they got to take care of the Eagles this week, and I'm not overly convinced they're going to do that. I think they will, but the Eagles are playing a little better, and then they've got a pretty darn good running back that might be able to give this team some problems.
Well, you're also seeing probably the best play out of the linebackers right now. Jermaine Pratt had 13 tackles. I thought he was everywhere this past game against Cleveland.
He was.
Logan Wilson had 10 tackles of his own. So you'd certainly like to see some of those things there. Trey Hendrickson was a monster, an
Oh my God,
absolute
yeah,
monster.
he's playing really, really, really good this year.
He's playing as if he's probably going to be preparing a request for another extension in this offseason. So I won't blame him for doing that.
No, he's been unblockable basically.
And then I just wonder what this offense has to figure it out. This offense is not playing well right now. You mentioned earlier.
Figure out what's going on. I mean, we see them trying to feed Chase Brown a little more, and it was working a little bit, but he had a couple of good bursts Sunday, but just consistently, it doesn't matter who they have back there right now. And you feel like the line's pretty darn good, right? Even Cody Ford played fairly well when he came in for Brown on Sunday. He seemed like he was actually a plus in the second half. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't know. I don't know why that running game is struggling as much as it is, because they got to get that figured out.
Well, I think even more so, you need to get the pass game figured out, because you pass way more than you run with this offense. And there's two things that I'm noticing with Joe Burrow, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on. The first thing is he's holding the ball longer than he has his entire career.
Yep.
I believe it's a second longer that he's taking to throw the ball. And I wonder how much of that is either the fact that he knows he has a better line and he thinks they're going to hold longer, that he has an entire extra second. But I think the bigger issue that I'm concerned with is the fact that he doesn't seem to be seeing the field well. He has guys open that he just is not throwing to.
I don't know if you remember the play, and it was in the first half, and he tried to force a ball over the top to a tight end, and he had an outlet underneath that could have run for a ways.
That was the ball they threw to Tanner Hudson, and he missed the flat. And the flat probably gives you 15, 20 yards. And instead he overthrows Tanner Hudson, who's in double coverage, oddly.
And it was very odd because it was right in front of him. He rolled that way. And it's like, how did he not see that? So I don't know what's going on there. And I don't know if they've just been getting a bunch of different looks, and it's been a little harder for him to decipher quickly where the open guy is. Now that one, I can't explain. The guy was right in front of him. But I don't know. There's something going on that is messing with what they like to do. And hopefully they figure it out. They have time to figure it out, but you can't drop too many more, right? I mean, you kind of got to figure it out this week.
So you have 4-2 Philadelphia coming into town against 3-4 Cincinnati. The opening line started Bengals favored at -2.5. The over-under on this one opened up at 46.5. That line's moved to 47.5. It's still at -2.5, though, favoring the Bengals. That said, ESPN does not believe in the Bengals. They are giving the Eagles a 55.8% chance. I think that the Bengals rush defense, the rush defense has gotten better. So I'm feeling a little bit better this week than I did probably 3 weeks ago in regards to slowing down the run. Jalen Hurts has been up and down this season. He's not been who Jalen Hurts was probably the last 2 or 3 years. So we'll see what Jalen Hurts shows up at this game. You've also seen, I think, better play from your secondary for the Bengals, and I'm just feeling better about the defense going into this. Plus, you got guys who were out the last couple of weeks that have been coming back over the course of the last week or two, with Chris Jenkins coming back, Sheldon Rankins coming back.
Yeah, that's really helped them up front, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's helped them a lot, and it's just getting that rotation and all that. And we saw that in the UC game too, and I think Coach or somebody talked about that a little bit after the game. Heck, it may have been the Godfather, but just, getting a little bit of a blow for some of these guys and able to rotate guys in, and how much that does help. And the Bengals have been able to do that, and they were able to do that Sunday a little bit more. Thank goodness. And they're going to need to be able to do it this Sunday, which they should. But getting some of those guys back definitely helped. Hopefully Geno Stone will be okay, because, every little bit helps, but we'll see.
I agree. Another bit of Bengals news I wanted to get to before we kind of close out, as we normally do with FC Cincinnati and the high school stuff. The county is apparently the county administration is looking into putting a roof on Paul Brown Paycor Stadium. Call it what you will. Clearly, they're listening to you and I, George.
That's right.
As we discussed this several weeks ago, but whether they do it or not, it at least is a look at what could be, and you have to think financially, the gift would pay for itself if you figure out if you can actually figure out how to put a roof over this oddly shaped stadium.
Yeah, and I would think I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but I would think there's got to be a way to do this, right?
Sure.
There's got to be a way. And I think it's definitely worth looking into. And if they're going to count on county and state money and other, local municipalities maybe to pitch in on this, or counties, there's got to, and depending on the study you look at, if there's any real benefit long term and all that. But I know this. I know when the Bengals have a home game, because I tried to do this about 4 weeks ago, go try to find a hotel room. And if you find one, try to find it at a rate that is the same as it would be any other time, because you're not going to find it.
No.
The hotels book up when they're in town. There's definite benefit to this area, because that means bars and restaurants are getting it too. The hotels, I don't want to say they gouge, but it's a premium price you pay for something close to downtown.
How many rooms are you still missing because of the Millennium construction that's been going on for the last several years?
No, you're right.
That place it felt like probably close to 1,000 rooms. I mean, that was a giant.
The Bengals used to put their rookies in there way back in the 80s when they would bring them in town, man. Back then, it wasn't as bad of a hotel as it turned out to be in the waning days. But I remember we'd go down there and bang on the doors of those rookies back when you could do those things. But it's smart to do that and be able to get some other events here. And I would hope that, the Bengals and however this stadium leases work, that some NCAA regionals maybe could come to Cincinnati. I mean, those that group wanted to do that Skyline Chili Bowl for Cincinnati for college football. Maybe, I mean, bowl games are going bye-bye, but I still think the NCAA should bid out these football games like the NFL bids out the Super Bowl. I think you bid out to these host cities and do it. Well, they do it for the tournament, the basketball. They should do it for football, and who knows? There'd be a chance to have a playoff game down there, and they can keep the big major bowl games in that rotation. But I think the quarterfinals, hell, go play them wherever where people will bid on it and cities want to welcome it in and have it and give them a shot at having an event.
Well, one of the events that you could potentially have down there is, say what you want about professional wrestling, but it is a huge draw, and you could end up just getting a ton of people in for an entire weekend that wouldn't necessarily be coming to the region because wrestling. It's a real thing.
I'm in the middle of that McMahon thing right now on Netflix, so
wild.
I know of what to speak. Oh, it's so wild.
There's only one difference there, George, in the way the NCAA tournament is done and the way college football is done.
Yes.
The NCAA has absolutely no say over college football.
None. Well, that is true.
Not a
but
single
the college
iota.
Football playoff committee or whoever the heck it is. I wish they'd bid out those quarterfinal games, and then you can have the Fiesta Bowl and the.
It's the good old boy network, brother. They ain't bidding out nothing.
Well, and yes, and part of that was because they didn't want, those people did not want that bowl system to go away. I mean, they fought that tooth and nail for 30 years. Yeah. And finally, they lost a little bit of their grip over it. And I will say this. The big bowls, when they did their bowl games, it was huge. They left I mean, when UC went down to that Orange Bowl and the hospitality we got there back when they played Virginia Tech, I mean, it was unbelievable. I can't tell you how many people with the Orange Bowl, all these volunteers and business people would just come up. You need anything? Heck, it was that way with the Cotton Bowl people down in Dallas when UC played in that national semifinal against Alabama. And they do a great job putting on a game. When in fact, that Cotton Bowl and what they did for the media was so over the freaking top. If you saw these accommodations they had for us every night of the week, this hospitality room, and it was open till 1 a.m. or whatever, and it was free beer, and there were snacks and other stuff, and they had breakfast, lunch, and dinner in that same room, all gratis. You just show your pass and go in. I missed 3/4 of it because we were always doing live shots and stuff, but I sure as hell got back there in time to have a couple of nightcaps.
As I would expect you to do, George.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to FC Cincinnati, their regular season is over. They ended up beating Philadelphia 2-1 in what ended up actually being the entire sweep for the weekend for Cincinnati. As you had, it was part of the sweep because you had FC Cincinnati, Bengals. I hope somebody hit that parlay because that would have been fantastic.
That would have been, yes.
I don't know that you could bet on the exhibition game between Ohio State and
Probably
Cincinnati, but in any case, part of the sweep. But they win 2-1, and now they will play New York City FC.
Yes, New York City FC.
That game will be here in town, the first round of the playoffs, and that'll be on the 28th. So Saturday?
Next Monday.
Sunday.
Yeah,
Monday.
Yeah, it's a Monday night. Then they play in Philly, and then they would come back here on, if a third game is necessary. I want to say the first it's probably the second. God, what was it? Is it I'm on the wrong month. Is it the 9th? Is it that far out that they would play that third match?
Oh, I didn't even look at any of that. It would be.
Yeah, I think it would be.
It would be the 2nd and 9th. Yeah, 2nd and the 9th. I'm looking at it.
Yep. So this first round takes a little while, but with 3 matches,
as everything with the MLS does. I don't even know how they fit it all. I don't understand how they fit a whole season into it.
Back in February or March.
That's what I'm saying. I have no idea how they fit this all into a calendar year at this point, because it seems like this has been a year and a half of a season.
And God knows, I mean, I would say Cincinnati obviously should be favored, but I don't know the way they've been playing lately. And these two split in the regular season. In fact, I think they lost in New York City not all that long ago, probably within the last month. But they'll be playing for keeps, and hopefully they'll be playing to move on to the second round and keep hope alive for a championship.
Yeah, Cincinnati opened as -125 winners. That line has moved to -115. So we'll see how that all goes. But they did win 3 of 5 in the regular season against New York City FC. So you're feeling pretty good about it. And most FC Cincinnati fans, they actually hate New York City FC. It feels like one of those rivalries outside of Columbus. So,
well, it'll be fun. It will be good to see. And, New York's got a lot going on right now. They almost had the Mets no, they didn't almost have the Mets. But they got the Yankees in the World Series, and the Mets were in the National League Championship. But, yeah, the Dodgers pretty much stifled them.
What a boring World Series. The two highest paid teams. Gross.
It's like, no one liked me saying that I did. I would rather have Cleveland won, and that's hard to say. Did. But I didn't want the Mets or the Dodgers to win. I watched it, but it's like I want them both to lose.
Get those $300 million payrolls out of here.
It does.
What's going on in high school, George?
Well, they're rounding it out. Final week of the regular season coming up. Better games. Lakota West 8-1 at Mason in the GMC. Anderson still undefeated. Beat Winton Woods last week. That's a good win for the Raptors, and they are now 9-0 and looking to close out a perfect 10-0 at Loveland. Let's see. Baden's at McNick. That should be a fun game, actually. LaSalle at Elder in the GCL. That's always a fun game. In Kentucky, Ryle at Simon Kenton. Pretty good game there. And what else we have? Mason County at Covcat, believe it or not, in Class 4A is a pretty good matchup. I think Covcat will win that, but Mason County's been playing pretty well this year. So I may shoot up the hill and check that game out Friday night. I'm intrigued out of what I've seen, looking at Mason County and their schedule this year on how they've handled it. Maybe I'll go up there and see a pretty good game. I don't know.
All right. Well, the high schools are rounding it out, and we're going to do just the same here on this little show.
Yep.
But another episode in the books. Again, thank you to Remington Tavern, who sponsors us here. 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m. $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, Bottle Cap Bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. Check them out on Instagram at RemyTavCincy or follow them on Facebook. But for George Vogel, I'm Aaron Smith. We will be back here on Tuesday night, 9 o'clock next week, where we will discuss all of your Cincinnati sports. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Aaron.